Sure, Michael. You're a friend of the show. You're my friend. Please answer the question.
I answer the question the way I want. Nobody's going to dictate the way I answer questions on this show. You may not like the way I answer the question, but I gave an answer. No, I don't like that. We're not going to do dictating reply the way I want you to reply. Then just don't ask me a question if you don't like my response. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Sure, Michael, you don't get to...
Do we not live in a democracy now? I mean, we talked a lot about a democracy tonight.
You don't get to just change the subject to avoid having to say something that might be perceived as negative about Donald Trump.
No, Abby, you just didn't like my answer to your question.
Well, that's what it seems like. If you were a politician, a regular person on the street would say, well, that sounds like spin to me.
No, you asked a question.
Because it does sound like spin.
And my response to your question was, instead of doing this, the president should be focused on X, Y, and Z. That is an answer to the question.
Welcome to Kimara Reacts. Before we dive in, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, because I don't answer to networks, donors, or narratives.
Ready or not? Ready or not? Here I come, can't hide. Gonna find you, and then like a game of chess where I rest. No stress, no success.
Today we are discussing Abby Phillip, CNN's golden girl who looks polished, sounds articulate, and pretends to speak for Black America. But let's be honest, she's not one of us. She's one of them.
Address is there were a lot of people who heard what you had to say, and a lot of them are offended by the idea that you would repeat Jim Crow 3 times in your comments as if to suggest that that was a time period because their Black families were, in your words, together, because, in your words, Black people were not just more conservative, they voted more conservatively. That's a good thing. I mean, it sounds like nostalgia. Do you regret using that time frame as a reference?
Nobody ever made nostalgia. That was never the point. It wasn't even about that. So where now I'm going to get my backup is I didn't say that. I didn't even insinuate that. That is where the media and yes, Hakeem Jeffries and a lot of other people are taking.
What exactly didn't you insinuate?
No,
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. What didn't you insinuate?
The premise of your question, I did not insinuate. That is what people are trying to weave into what I said. Not the idea
I just want to, just to clarify my questioning of you.
Sure.
I mean, I understand that this idea that you said it was better. You didn't use the words better, but when you talk about that time period, you're suggesting that because the Black family was together, they were better off than they are now.
Abby Phillip is not a journalist. She's a messenger for the machine. Every word that leaves her mouth has been combed through, focus grouped, and pre-approved by the same system that keeps our communities broken and blames Republicans for the mess Democrats made.
But what about other things? I mean, what about redlining? Do you think that had an effect on the Black family? What about mass incarceration? What about the war on drugs, which was pushed by a Republican president whose advisor said it was specifically to target Black people? What about all of those things?
Look, if you want to talk about redlining and a lot of the other policies that were put forward, quite frankly, by the Democrat Party, if you're going to go back to Jim Crow, because Jim Crow was Democrat policies.
Well,
that's what that was.
I know that you know this.
Don't cut me off when I'm trying to make a point.
Let me just, I have to correct on a factual point here. I know that you know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party of today are ideologically not what they were during Jim Crow. You know that, Congressman. So to suggest that, the Democrats of 1920 are the same ideologically as the Democrats of today is inaccurate. So just, you can continue, but I wanted to...
That's not totally true, Abby, and I think if we want to have that conversation about the policy positions between Republicans and Democrats, we can have that conversation, but
one of the other
Abby,
things...
do you want to have a conversation?
One of the other things,
I'm trying to understand how you want this...
She'll criticize conservatives all day long, but ask her where all that Black Lives Matter money went. Silence. Let's talk about the hypocrisy. When black boys can't read at grade level in liberal-run cities, where is Abby? When illegal immigrants are pushed to the front of the line while black families suffer in silence, where is Abby? When crime is destroying our neighborhoods, what does she say? It's complicated? No, ma'am, it's corruption, and you're helping cover it up. Abby loves to appear relatable. She'll quote a Maya Angelou poem on Monday and ignore the destruction of black families by Friday. She is what happens when white liberal media needs a black face to sell their lies. A woman with a college degree, a microphone, and no connection to the people she pretends to represent. Comment below. Do you feel media figures like Abby Phillip truly represents black voices, or are they performing for power?
I'll go back to Elon Musk for a second, because it is true that he spent $20 million on affiliated groups that were involved in this race. Was it a risk for Republicans to put all their eggs in that basket? Not only did he spend the money, he came to the state. Right. He came to the state. He talked about cutting Medicaid, Social Security through Doge, bringing those issues up.
Actually, he never talked. He explicitly said in that he would not cut Social Security.
Well,
that's exactly what he said.
Talked at his rallies.
No, other people said about that, but I was there. I watched it.
Okay.
He did not say he was going to cut Medicaid.
Other people at his rallies who work for Doge, who work for Elon Musk's organization, talked about those issues.
No, I was at the rally. Not a one of them said that. That's what protesters said, but nobody there actually said that.
Do you think that there are risks here?
There are. People believe the lies that people are saying about that. But that's not at all what they said. If people believe that Medicaid and Medicare is going to be touched, that's just a flat, outright lie. What he talked about are people who are over 120 years old, who clearly are not alive.
Well, the reason I brought it up is
Social Security or Medicaid.
Okay, well,
that's totally wrong.
Just to sort this out, the reason I brought this up is because the claim here is that there's massive widespread fraud and that's all they're addressing. That's obviously a disputed claim, because it's not true that 120-year-old people are getting Social Security checks. The checks stop at a certain point automatically, because those checks and balances
Social Security numbers get counted for various parts of the federal government. So they don't get a benefit directly to those people, but they count for money that gets allocated to different departments in their budget. And they shouldn't be. If somebody's no longer alive, they shouldn't be able to count that.
I guess my fundamental question was, what are the risks here of Elon dabbling in elections for Republicans going forward?
Well, again, I think in the end, he's going to have to continue to make the case. Part of the reason why, when we talked about our recall, what flipped things for us early on in that recall process, Time magazine called me Dead Man Walker. And the reason was because all the narratives coming out from the press, coming up from the left, were about all these horrible, egregious things. Once we started to give examples of things we were actually doing, not the things the press said, not the things that our opponents said, but the things that we were actually doing, when we ended up going before the voters in the final election in the recall, we actually won by more votes than we did. So I think that what's paramount for him or anyone else aligned with him is keep giving actual examples of what they're doing. Set aside things like Social Security and make it abundantly clear that that's not being touched. But if there's waste, fraud, or abuse, spell it out, make the case, and bring it to the voter.
When black women like Abby use their platform to deflect blame, mislead viewers, and protect the political elite, our people pay the price. She may be intelligent, maybe, but what good is intelligence if it's used to deceive? Abby Phillip is just one face in a long line of polished performers who talk like they care, but never challenge the people truly in power. If you have had enough of the gaslighting, the elitism, and the quiet betrayal, then stay right here, because I will keep calling it out. Like, share, and subscribe for more truth with backbone, because the truth doesn't come from CNN. It comes from you and me.